The early morning sun was just beginning to cast a peculiar, almost unnerving hue across the meticulously kept grounds of Harmony Heights. The very name, Harmony Heights, was enough to induce a visceral reaction, especially considering the undercurrent of petty autocracy that festered beneath its impeccably trimmed hedges. John was nursing the first cup of coffee, a robust, slightly bitter concoction, the sole bulwark against the temptation to retreat back to bed. Then, a rapping at the door. We weren't expecting anyone, and in this particular enclave, unannounced arrivals rarely heralded anything pleasant. Typically, it was a misplaced delivery, a wayward canine, always a diminutive, yapping specimen, or, heaven forbid, Karen Whitmore herself. I set my mug down with a weary exhale, the ceramic producing a sharp clink against the granite countertop. Karen Whitmore, the self-proclaimed sovereign of the Homeowners Association, a woman whose very being seemed to exude an acidic disposition. I stretched, my knuckles popping, as I instinctively braced myself for whatever new torment she was poised to inflict. Swinging the door open, my suspicions were validated. There she stood, clutching a clipboard as if it held the keys to global annihilation. Her lips were so tightly compressed they were virtually non-existent, a clear indication she'd either recently consumed a lemon or, more likely, had been scrutinizing the HOA bylaws. "We need to converse," she announced, her tone laced with a saccharine politeness that grated on the nerves. I propped myself against the doorframe, attempting an air of nonchalance, though internally a storm was brewing. "Karen," I began, managing a strained smile, "it's barely past 7. It's far too early for whatever this entails." She disregarded my plea, as was her custom. Karen Whitmore operated as an unstoppable force. Civilities were merely minor inconveniences to be steamrolled. She thrust a folded document into my hand. "Your brother is in breach of our HOA regulations," she declared, her voice escalating slightly. "Persistent non-compliance will result in repercussions." The word repercussions hung in the air, heavy and ominous, like a poorly executed threat from a low-budget adversary. Even before unfolding the note, I knew it wouldn't be favorable. My brother David, a veteran, was the subject of concern. I unfolded the letter, a sense of foreboding settling in my stomach. It was typed, naturally, in that sterile, official typeface the HOA seemed to favor. My eyes scanned the page, and I nearly choked. "Mr. David Carter," I read aloud, my voice tinged with disbelief, "has been observed repeatedly in unauthorized attire within the neighborhood. Specifically, military camouflage. This disrupts the visual harmony of the community and may prove unsettling to other residents." I blinked, rereading the accusation. "Are you serious?" I asked, looking up at Karen, who remained a statue of smug disapproval. Her expression was unyielding. "Yes." I leaned back against the doorframe, shaking my head. "You're telling me my brother, who just returned from serving his country, is prohibited from wearing camouflage in his own driveway?" Karen's nose twitched, as if the very mention of country was a personal affront. "It's not about him," she stated, her voice taut. "It's about adherence to protocol. HOA policy unequivocally mandates that residents maintain a neutral and non-disruptive aesthetic within community spaces." I inhaled deeply, attempting to maintain a semblance of composure. I'd endured my share of absurdities from this HOA, but this was a new echelon of ridiculousness. "Karen," I said, rubbing my temples, "do you have any comprehension of who my brother is?" "I couldn't care less if he were the mayor," she retorted, her eyes narrowing. "Rules are rules." I couldn't suppress a laugh, a short, sharp burst of incredulity, if only she knew. Inside, David was already in the kitchen, preparing coffee. He'd overheard the muffled exchange, the sharp edge in Karen's tone. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, his eyes tightening. He'd been home less than a week, attempting to decompress, to find a measure of peace after everything. This sort of triviality was the last thing he needed. I returned inside, still chuckling darkly. "You will not believe this," I announced, handing David the letter. He took it, his expression unreadable as he perused its contents. The easy smile that had begun to return to his face over the past few days vanished. He finished reading, exhaled slowly, and handed the paper back. "They have an issue with my wearing camouflage," he stated, not as a question. "Oh, not just camouflage," I replied, barely containing my amusement. "They believe you're disrupting the visual harmony of the community." David tilted his head, as if anticipating a punchline. When none came, he simply nodded. All right. I narrowed my eyes. "That's it? All right?" A slow smirk spread across David's face. "Oh, this is going to be entertaining." Karen Whitmore, standing on her impeccably manicured lawn, felt a surge of righteous indignation. This blatant disregard for the established order was unacceptable. She retrieved her phone, already composing a strongly worded missive to the rest of the HOA board. This would be addressed decisively. Later that day, David was in the backyard, grilling steaks. He moved with practiced efficiency, flipping the meat with tongs as if conducting a delicate military maneuver. He was wearing camouflage pants and a plain black t-shirt. "They have a problem with these?" he inquired, gesturing to his pants with the tongs as I handed him a beer. I took a swig. "Apparently, they're a threat to the aesthetic integrity of Harmony Heights." David snorted. "I've encountered warlords with more flexibility." I grinned. "I can't wait to see your next move." The following morning, I awoke to find David standing before the bathroom mirror, brushing his teeth. But it wasn't his morning ablutions that caught my attention. It was his attire. Full military fatigues, tactical boots, even his beret. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Really, David?" He met my gaze in the mirror, a mischievous glint in his eyes, toothbrush still in his mouth. "Oh, it's war now." An hour later, he casually strolled out to retrieve the mail, dressed as if he were about to parachute into a combat zone. A few neighbors peered through their blinds, some clearly amused, others whispering with concern. And then there was Karen, standing on her porch, gripping her phone as if it were a weapon. Mrs. Henderson, watering her petunias, nearly dropped her watering can as David offered her a cheerful wave. Two teenage boys on skateboards stopped, staring and whispering to each other. "Dude, is that a real soldier?" Mr. Peterson, a retired accountant known for his rigid adherence to routine, spilled his morning coffee as he watched David pass. I sipped my coffee, observing the unfolding spectacle from the safety of the front porch. Karen stormed across the street, her heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. "This is an escalation," she snapped, her face flushed. David turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, I thought we were enforcing dress codes." Her eye twitched. "This is not amusing, David." He nodded solemnly. "I agree. Dress code violations are a serious matter." Karen, trembling with frustration, lifted her phone. "I'm documenting this." David saluted again. A perfect military salute. "Make sure to get my good side." That was the final straw. Karen turned on her heel and stormed off, furiously typing into her phone, no doubt drafting another formal complaint, perhaps even a new HOA amendment specifically prohibiting military personnel from dressing like military personnel. I shook my head, grinning. "You're playing a dangerous game, man." David's smile was almost languid. "You call it dangerous, I call it entertaining." Later that evening, an official letter from the HOA arrived. This time it wasn't merely a warning, it was a formal notice of violation, complete with threats of escalating action. "She's doubling down," I announced, reading it aloud. David leaned back in his chair, utterly unfazed. "Good." I raised an eyebrow. "Good?" He took another bite of his steak, chewing thoughtfully. "Because now," he replied, "I get to have some real fun." 20 years prior, Karen hadn't been the iron-fisted ruler of Harmony Heights. She'd been different, married to a soldier, Frank, who deployed overseas. He returned changed, distant. The marriage dissolved, leaving Karen bitter and resentful, not just towards Frank, but towards the entire institution he represented. The rigid rules of the HOA, the control she exerted over her small domain, were her method of imposing order on a world that had once felt chaotic and unjust, and the seemingly depleted treasury? It turned out the HOA fees weren't solely dedicated to landscaping. A few days later, I received a text from Chris, a neighbor down the street and a member of our small resistance group. "Dude, your brother just walked into the grocery store looking like he's on a black ops mission. Karen saw him. She's on the warpath." I grinned. I didn't even need to ask what had happened. I could picture it perfectly. David, strolling through the aisles, collecting eggs and milk with the mundane efficiency of a civilian, all while clad as if on a covert operation. And Karen? She was likely beside herself. The grocery store incident, David recounted later, still grinning, had been quite the spectacle. Karen had nearly had an aneurysm in the produce section, ranting about community standards and my alleged disruption. But then, something unexpected occurred. A man in the store, recognizing me from a previous news interview, shook my hand and thanked me for my service. Karen looked as if she'd swallowed a lemon. Then, she made the mistake of summoning store security. Security arrived, took one look at me, and, well, one of them was a former soldier. He saw my unit patch and immediately addressed me as "Sir." Karen stormed out shortly thereafter. She called security on me, David recounted, and they ended up saluting me instead. I burst out laughing. "You're kidding." "Nope," David replied, grabbing a bottle of water, "and she's not done yet." That prediction proved accurate. Another letter arrived, this one a formal warning laden with legal terminology. "They're really escalating," I said, reading it aloud. David leaned back, unperturbed. "Good. That's what makes it fun." I sighed. "You're enjoying this far too much." "Of course I am," David said. "This isn't a battle she can win. She just doesn't realize it yet." Susan, Karen's confidant and a fellow HOA board member, was someone who followed Karen's lead without question. The HOA meeting room was a sterile beige box designed to suppress any hint of individuality or dissent. Karen sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. A stack of papers lay before her, a testament to her relentless pursuit of, well, whatever it was she was pursuing. David walked in, clad in his full uniform. I followed, taking a seat next to him. The room crackled with tension, everyone anticipating the explosion. Karen cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sharp, "we have reached a decision." David offered her a polite smile. "Oh, please, enlighten me." Karen slid a document across the table. "You are officially being fined for non-compliance with HOA regulations. Should you refuse to pay, we will be compelled to pursue further legal action." "That won't hold up," Susan interjected, but was quickly silenced by Karen. David glanced at the paper, then leaned back, the picture of calm. "You do realize I'm an active duty military officer, correct?" Karen scoffed. "That does not exempt you from the rules of this neighborhood." David nodded. "You're right, it doesn't. But you know what it does exempt me from?" Karen blinked, momentarily disoriented. David pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen around. He played a short clip from a government website. The video clearly outlined a federal law protecting active military personnel from discriminatory housing policies, including HOA restrictions that unfairly target their service. A hush fell over the room. Karen's lips thinned. "That's irrelevant." David raised an eyebrow. "A federal law is irrelevant?" Karen straightened her posture. "We are an independent homeowners association. Our regulations are legally binding." David took a slow sip of water he'd brought himself, of course. "No, they're not. Not when they directly violate federal law." Karen's eye twitched. One of the other board members, a nervous-looking man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. "Karen, is this something we verified before issuing the fine?" Karen shot him a glare. "This is about maintaining community standards." I grinned. "Pretty sure federal law outranks the HOA handbook." Another board member, Mrs. Rodriguez, spoke up. "Karen, I don't believe we can actually enforce this." Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "This is an internal matter." David smirked. "Not anymore. You see, I contacted a friend last night. He works with the legal team at the base. Turns out they're quite interested in your activities here. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You contacted a military lawyer? David shrugged. I figured, since you wanted to pursue legal action, I should be prepared. And besides, he added, his voice low and steady, I have it on good authority that the HOA's finances aren't exactly pristine. Karen went pale. The board members exchanged nervous glances. What? What are you talking about, Karen? David leaned forward. Let's just say someone might have been using HOA funds for personal expenses. Mr. Henderson coughed. I think it would be best if we just drop this. Karen turned on him, her voice rising. You're giving in? We can't allow this to stand. I leaned forward. Karen, let me ask you something. If this goes to court and you lose, what do you think happens next? Karen's jaw tightened. David answered for her. It means not only will the HOA be forced to drop every single one of these complaints, but you might also face legal repercussions for targeting an active duty officer and for potential financial misconduct. A bead of sweat formed on Karen's forehead. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke again, her voice firmer this time. Karen, I move that we table this discussion and drop all charges against Mr. Carter. I second that, Mr. Henderson said quickly. Susan reluctantly agreed. Karen looked as if she wanted to scream. She gripped the papers in front of her so tightly her knuckles turned white, but she knew it was over. The HOA had no choice. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Fine. David smiled. I appreciate your cooperation. Karen stood up so quickly, her chair nearly toppled over. Without another word, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The remaining board members sat in awkward silence. Well, Mr. Henderson sighed. That was eventful. David stood, shaking a few hands. I hope we can all get along better moving forward. As we walked out of the meeting hall, I grinned at David. So, does this mean we won? David smirked. We won the battle. I arched an eyebrow. You think she's going to try something else? Oh, absolutely, David said. People like Karen don't just give up. And he was right. Over the next few days, Karen tried everything. Passive-aggressive emails, flyers about proper neighborhood attire, even stopping random neighbors to complain about the threat to community values. But it didn't matter. The board had made its decision. She had lost. Then, one evening, as David and I were relaxing on the porch, we saw it. A moving truck. Karen was packing up. I stared in disbelief. No way, David smirked. Told you she'd dig her own grave. We watched as Karen barked orders at the movers, her face twisted in frustration. She spotted us across the street, and for a brief second, our eyes met. I gave her a little wave. David, ever the professional, simply nodded in acknowledgement. Karen turned away, muttering something under her breath as she stomped back inside. Susan was nowhere in sight. I grinned. I can't believe it. She's actually leaving. David stretched. She made herself unwelcome. This was inevitable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the neighborhood seemed lighter, more peaceful. The reign of Karen Whitmore was officially over. That weekend, David hosted a barbecue. It was a celebration, a way to bring the community together after all the drama. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up before finally shared their own HOA horror stories. Laughter filled the air. I nudged David. You realize this is going to be one of those legendary stories people tell for years, right? David smirked. So, what now? I asked. Now, he took a slow sip of beer. I finally get to relax. Perhaps that was wishful thinking, given the nature of Harmony Heights. There was always another Karen waiting in the wings. But for now, peace had returned.